Hey guys, so today I want to talk about attachment theory. This theory I've seen talked about quite a bit, but I want to do an intro of attachment theory, and then in my next video I'm going to talk about attachment styles and we'll delve deeper into that. Attachment theory is the study of the emotional bond between children and their caregivers. So the way that they studied this theory is they use primarily the mother to observe how the child will interact when the mother leaves a room or leaves their child in a strange situation. And the research showed that the way the child responds when mother returns back to the child indicates a secure or insecure attachment style. With attachment theory, it is important to consider nature and nurture. Nature is what you are born with. It's a, predisposition of personality, whereas the nurture is what secure base did we have growing up through our caregivers. So in attachment theory, we are more so focusing on the nurture aspect than the nature aspect. However, we do have to consider nature, because if you see that you and your siblings responded very differently to your parents, it can be part of nature. However, nurture helps you develop emotional maturity. Nurture is where we learned how to connect to ourselves and other people. The power of attachment is that we actually do find who we are through someone else first. That's someone else being the caregiver. When you think of children, no person has the power to give that child value or worth, but the caregiver has that responsibility to show the child or to remind the child of their value and worth. And that's why attachment is so powerful, because essentially the caregiver is holding up a mirror to the child to remind them who they are. So when you're showing that child emotional attunement, you're creating safety for them, you're being loving towards them, they are feeling secure around you. You're in those little interactions, you're reminding them of their worth, you're reminding them of their value. And so the power of attachment goes very deep, because children do not have the capacity to know who they are on their own first. They are actually looking at their caregivers to show them who they are. They are looking at mom and dad for that attention, for that love, to be reminded of what security actually means. And so when you have attachment figures or caregivers that are not providing secure attachment, that can be very detrimental in the emotional development stage. Emotional attunement is being able to identify where your child is at emotionally and to be able to respond accordingly to their needs. And when we're considering emotional regulation as adults, we can learn coping skills to self-regulate or to find other people to help us regulate. But as a child, we actually were depending on another person to be able to regulate our emotions. So when you think about your family of origin, look at your environment, look at your mother or your father. Were they able to help you regulate by being attuned to you, by drawing close, by connecting with you, by helping you make sense of your emotional realm? Or were they anxious themselves or dismissive, which then affected your nervous system? Children learn emotional regulation through their caregivers first. And so if that has been affected in some way or stunted, there is going to be a lot of struggle as an adult to be able to regulate your own emotions. A lot of our anxiety and insecurity and feelings of depression can actually be a result from insecure attachment. Another thing to consider with attachment style is we find out our style of relating under stress. When you're alone and you're in a group and everyone's feeling good, you can think like, oh, I do have secure attachment. But what happens when there's a trigger? What happens when there is relational threat? Where do you run? Do you run closer in urgency and anxiety? Do you try to fix? Do you try to control? Or when you see relational threat, do you avoid? Do you run away? Do you shut down? Under stress is where we will learn what our attachment style is. The part that I am really passionate about teaching is what repair looks like in conflict. Secure attachment does not mean that you had a perfect childhood. It doesn't mean there wasn't conflict. But generally with children with secure attachment or adults that have secure attachment is that they were able to learn repair. Repair is when a child knows that their caregiver will circle back with them after conflict. Will my mom or dad return to me after there was conflict, after I got in trouble, or after the child witnessed the parents fighting? Was there a circle back? So does the child know that, you know what, we are going to talk about this afterwards. I'm not going to be left alone in my negative emotions. My parents will apologize to me, or we will be able to talk about this conflict after the fact. Because the fact is, if a child is left in conflict without repair, that is actually the trauma after the trauma, meaning the initial trauma or the initial trigger point is the pain of the situation, the pain of the conflict, whatever that conflict looks like. But what can feel more traumatic to a child is when there is not repair after the conflict, when they're stuck at that point. So the wound gets deeper. And if there's a pattern of that, it is more likely that insecure attachment will develop. When we do not experience repair, when we do not experience communication after discord, we're left on our own to figure it out. So imagine a child being left on their own to figure out a conflict. That means they are narrating their experiences inside their head, and it's often becoming distorted. Children need their caregiver to help them narrate or explain experiences. Because if they're left alone to do that, it is often confused. They will often go to self-blame. They become emotionally dysregulated because they're not talking about it. But if a child knows that they can talk about conflict or hard feelings with their caregiver, actually they're able to regulate more. Their perception on reality is a lot more clear because they had someone help them narrate that experience for them. Unpacking your attachment style can help with healing underlying wounds that people can often suppress, because a common belief is, why go back to the past? But if things are happening in your present that are reenacting or that you find problematic, it might actually be something from the past that is showing up in the present. So processing your family of origin, processing your attachment style, or how you internalized your experiences through, watching your parents parent you, is very healing to your mind and psychologically can be so helpful in emotional development and even emotional maturity, because we as human beings want to protect our family. We want to protect our caregiver's name. There's a sense of loyalty, but we often will avoid going to hard places because it can feel very painful, but it's in that pain that can actually be the catalyst of healing. So in the next video, we will go through 3 different attachment styles anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. And we will dive a little deeper in the next video. See you then.